Oh my God, I love this film. I'm so thrilled to introduce our guest speakers tonight. Our moderator is Dr. Janani Subramanian. In addition to her day job as the Hammer Museum's Manager of Public Programs, she's also a PhD film scholar with a special interest in horror movies and the occult. Tonight, Janani will be interviewing Stuart de Haan, the co-founder of the Arizona chapter of the Satanic Temple. He was formerly a member of the National Council and attorney for the Satanic Temple, and he's currently representing the temple in both the Scottsdale invocation case and in the Arkansas Baphomet lawsuit. So please join me in welcoming Janani Subramanian and Stuart de Haan. Stu, you're my hero.
Hi. Can we get another round of applause?
Hello.
Stu, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thanks for coming.
And I have to say, and I think the audience will probably echo this, but I think I might be a Satanist.
Yeah, we hear that a lot when people kind of figure out what it is we actually do.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people have a lot of repressed thoughts that we've kind of put to the forefront.
Absolutely.
And through this video, through this film, that really,
Yeah.
I think Penny kind of nailed it there.
Yeah, you're letting us all be out and free Satanists, so thank you for that. So one of the things that I actually really love about this film is that we get to see the kind of people who make up the Satanic Temple. You get to see how diverse it is in terms of race and age and profession. And I really liked hearing about why people came to the organization. So I would love to know more about why you came to the Satanic Temple, how you found it, sort of what led you down this path.
Sure. I think like Mason being the zesty little atheist. That's my favorite line, at least in that story there. But a lot of people come from really tragic reasons. A lot of the LGBT community comes because they were pretty much ousted by their families, by their churches, things like that. I had an incident personally when I lived in Georgia briefly, where I was the unchurched child. I was not personally raised very religious, though my parents were, and so I was kind of a little outcast. And I think all of us kind of started there. And like Axis said, I was also a kid that grew up on Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal. So when you have an entire community saying everything that makes your life great is terrible, you kind of, you can either reject it or you can embrace it. So I kind of came from that aspect of it. I studied revolutionary politics in undergrad. That was another part of this, where to me this was kind of a natural extension of what I was already doing. And by trade, I'm a criminal defense attorney. So fighting the government is kind of my jam. So when I got involved with the Satanic Temple, like I was explaining, I was just a member. And then when Lucian figured out I was an attorney, he introduced me to Michelle, who's now one of my best friends, and she and I co-founded the chapter. And then when he asked if I was interested in doing the lawsuits, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm a criminal defense. If you stab someone, I'm the guy to call, but this is not really what I do, until it was. So I kind of took a chance, and I decided that, I do constitutional law against the government. I just need to learn the civil rules of procedure instead of the criminal ones. And now I have the 2 pending cases. So I got my bar license, pro hoc vice, in Arkansas to handle Baphomet, and then of course the Arizona case. Not in Phoenix, it's Scottsdale, that wasn't touched on there, but that was kind of the progression of the whole thing.
I think Lucian must be very thankful to have you on his team.
He better be. It's a pain in the ass. a lot of hate mail.
So you mentioned, heavy metal and Dungeons and Dragons, and the film talks about the sort of satanic panic of the 1980s, and I think one of the good things the film does is sort of lay out how Satanists, the Satanic Temple in particular, has very little to do with Satan as an entity. So I was wondering what your relationship is to Satan.
Lucian touched on it a little bit in the film, where as far as codified Satanism, it's always been recognized as non-theistic. So whether it's the Church of Satan under with Anton LaVey or with the Satanic Temple, one of the most common things that we have with the Church of Satan is that this is a metaphorical construct. So to us, whether you believe in a god or you're polytheistic or what have you, everyone's an atheist to someone else's religion. If you're a Christian, you're an atheist to the Norse gods. So what we're saying is it's all mythology. This is mythology across the board. We just recognize it, but just because something's mythology doesn't mean it's not a religion. So to us, it's just kind of acknowledging that openly and using it as our best metaphor for challenging what we find as arbitrary authority or corrupt systems. And to us, in the Western world, the best symbol for that is Satan.
Yeah, no, he's a powerful rebel in terms of mythology. So the Phoenix, sort of touching on that, the Phoenix City Council scene, I think brings up a lot of what's at the heart of this film and the conflicts that the Satanic Temple has provoked. Free speech, separating church and state, and sort of seeing how those play out in these smaller political spheres around the U.S. And it sounds like that was a defining moment for you and Michelle in terms of sort of how deeply you got involved with the temple. So I was wondering if you could say more about how that came about. Why did you decide on that particular sort of arena?
I still have a hard time watching that scene, actually, because that was the point of no return. That was the point where if you Google me and Michelle's name, we don't use pseudonyms, it's our real names, there's nothing else there. Every employer we're ever going to have for the rest of our lives are going to see that. This affected our lives, and we were getting a lot of hate mail and death threats. I mean, it went on for weeks. At one point, we were afraid to leave the house. The way that came about was one email. It was a one-liner, hey, can we give an invocation? And that's the start of the whole thing. So that meeting that it showed those clips of what people were saying, it was like a tent revival. It looked like something, if you put them in different costumes, it would look like it was something medieval. And that went on for 6 hours. That was, I think it might have been the longest city council meeting in the history of Phoenix. And it was just people, it was people preaching over and over, all demographics too. I mean, it was, and we sat through the whole thing. And I remember we sat in my law office until the sun was well down. It was all night because finally they were about to shut down the building in Phoenix. And that was that moment where I said, what the hell did we just do? This is over an email asking to give a 2-minute talk that everyone else is entitled to. And they did eventually tear down that system. And I had to just decide whether or not to sue them, but they replaced it with what's called a chaplain system. So they now have a rotating chaplain from either the fire or police department of Phoenix. The danger there that I thought at the time was that is actually a Supreme Court sanctioned system. There's actually a case called Marsh that said that's okay. So I kind of backed off. Also, I hadn't done this yet. But then in Scottsdale, the city council members themselves actually went and disparaged us, called us all kinds of names and everything else. And then when they didn't even change the system, they just told us to go fuck ourselves, basically. And we don't take kindly to that, so I sued them.
And so, watching that sort of outpouring of just hatred towards you guys in the city council meeting for 6 hours, I mean, what sort of reactions did it provoke in you?
I was kind of just speechless. I mean, people were in tears. Our parents were terrified. I mean, I felt really bad for Michelle. I felt partially responsible. We made the decision together, but she was very upset. And I mean, it really was. Now it was like, we have to do this. Now this is something we have to get fully involved in, because first of all, it's a point of no return. And secondly, I mean, that was vicious. There was actually some hit pieces on us. I mean, I got Pizzagated. Apparently I run a child slavery room in my basement. There's a YouTube video about it. And Michelle got called, she got called a misogynist, which was an interesting thing to me. Because she was like an alternative model. So there's a lot of bondage pictures of her and stuff online, and that was, according to some minister, teaches oppression of women. So there was a lot of projection with this stuff. We were called a hate group. We got compared to ISIS a lot, which I'm not even sure. I can't connect the dots. It's like Charlie Day. So it got to such a level of absurdity that it's hard to even wrap your mind around. When I'm like, really, we really wanted to give a 2-minute speech. I mean, there's nothing nefarious going on, but people were afraid that demons were going to come out of the ground. I mean, they're saying stuff like that, and like grown-ass adults,
That would have made it go viral if the demons had come out of the ground.
Oops.
So on the flip side, were you surprised by people coming out to support you?
I think that was kind of a slow burn. So our inaugural chapter event in Arizona, we were going, since of course the invocation never actually occurred. And at a certain point I was like, we're not doing this even if we're allowed to, because it got so dangerous. But we were going to have an inaugural event the day it was supposed to happen. I think 14,000 people RSVP'd. I'm like, we're going to need a bigger bar. And then one dude in a Hawaiian shirt showed up. So, I mean, that's how things start. Everyone's like, this looks rad. But now when we have an event, there's actually a lot more people than we expect. And I think we kind of, over the last 4 years, in Arizona at least, we've adopted the highway. We've done the Men Straighten with Satan campaign. We've done so many of these things that I kind of can't even list them off anymore. But I think they're just used to us. Like, they've seen me and Michelle in the media so many times, and no demons have come out yet. And they're just like, oh, these clowns again, which I'd prefer, But was I surprised? I guess it went exactly how I expected. People thought we were a bunch of weirdos, but now people think we're a bunch of weirdos that actually do stuff. So
yes, you're the good kind of weirdos. So I listened to an interview with you and Michelle on the Corpse Paint show, I think it was. And Michelle said something that I thought was quite interesting, that being a Satanist allows you to be a political agitator. And, many people are not allowed to be that sort of vocally and as outspoken as you guys are. So I'm curious, what other parts of your life does Satanism make easier? Sort of what roles does it allow you to play?
That's an interesting question. I think there's a sort of strength in owning a label that's supposed to be negative, because then it can't hurt you anymore. So when someone's calling you a bad name and then you write it on your back and you're like, yeah, that's me, that's my nickname now, all of a sudden it loses its power. So I think there's an extension of that in our lives in general. Like, we were trying to keep it secret, but there was no doing that almost out of the gate. So now that Michelle and I are kind of known for this, it affects, I have a band and a career, and like all the judges know this is what I do. And, love it or hate it, there seems to be at least a bit of respect in certain circles about it, because now we're just like, yeah, this is what I do. This is what I believe in. This is what I fight for. Take it or leave it. And I think that kind of extends throughout your life when you do something like that. And that's the power of owning it and calling yourself a Satanist publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned before, the community is made up of people who felt like outsiders, and now is their time to sort of take a name and be proud of it.
And it's also a community a lot of people never had, So when people always ask, why do you call it a religion? Just because we're so tied to this monotheistic viewpoint of religion in this country. It has everything a religion has but for that. And I think what makes religion so attractive to the human experience throughout time is that community. And we've kind of together given that to each other where we never had it.
So on the flip side, what obstacles has being a Satanist put in your daily life? And, you mentioned judges and in your work as a defense attorney and sort of just in general.
Well, I'm lucky in that my parents were just like, oh, hey, Mom, I'm now the devil's advocate, like, for real. And she's like, of course you are, honey. I mean, it was only a matter of time, right? Because what other shenanigans? So I'm lucky. My parents are cool about it. But I think what's damaging and what I'm always worried about with our members is people getting disowned, because it'll happen real quick. funny enough, though, I've seen more people disowned over this last election than Satanism. It's just, I'm not even kidding. Like, people weren't going home for Christmas, but the Satanists were all going home. It's crazy out there. So I don't know. I think it's probably adversely affected my business, but also gained me notoriety that helped my business. So I don't know. It's kind of a wash for me, but I always worry about, I worry about people's kids. The thing that bothered me about the after-school Satan situation was I was terrified of putting a target on kids' back, because a lot of us were bullied kids. I mean, I'm the kid playing D&D in the lunchroom. Like, I wasn't the cool guy. So to further put a target on a kid's back is something that I worry about, even if just the parents are involved. But of course, that's the parents' decision. And they're all going to make that informed decision, hopefully. But I don't know. I've been lucky. I don't know about everybody else, but I think it affects everyone differently. But I think a lot of people that chose this were disowned to begin with, and that's how they got here. So it's hard to say how this affects everybody.
Right. And this is their chance to sort of be disowned and be proud of it and be part of a disowned community.
Or at least find your people.
Yeah. So what I also found really interesting about the film is that it captures the beginning of both a political movement and a religion, and sort of the birth of something and all the growing pains that come with it, which just includes sort of managing an organization which has different chapters everywhere. So I'm wondering how does it work between the National Temple and the different chapters?
I had a unique experience because I kind of did all of it. I started as a member, and then I was a chapter head, and then I was in National Council, and now I'm kind of in my own thing because the lawsuits has taken all my time. But the idea is that the chapters are actually pretty autonomous. But what we found over time is every time we send an email, we get media attention. Anytime we do anything, there's a lot of media attention. What ends up happening is you have to kind of create some kind of governing body, or else you become like Occupy. Does anyone know what that was actually about anymore? Everything sucks. Cool. What'd you get done? So the idea is if you keep a message and you make sure that you stay, we don't want to be loose cannons. We want to be a laser, because that's how we get things done. And that's why I think there was a conflict internally. And I think the Jex was definitely the microcosm of that. I mean, she was a very important person. She was a founder. She was a spokesperson. She's very competent. I have a lot of respect for her, as does everyone in the temple, I think. But when you go off message and you go off to a point where now we can be called terrorists, and that's going to be a problem. And I think that does potentially harm the organization. And the thing is, I wish her well. If anyone wants to be as radical as possible, you want to go direct action in the streets, do it. But that's not exactly our thing. Problem with that is, like Lucian said, you gain some things by that and you lose some things by that, which we have. We've all lost friends. I mean, there was last summer, there was a lot of dissonance. We gained a lot of people, we lost a lot of people, but that's the growing pains, as you say. And I think that happens in all organizations, especially if your target is to shake things up. You're going to have dissonance within the community. So it's been a little rough.
It sounds like... Actually, one of my favorite parts in the film is when I think Penny is asking Lucian if he's excited, and he's like, no. And because, heavy is the head that wears the crown, like he's balancing a lot of sort of bureaucratic and sort of media attention, and he's got a lot on his shoulders. And
it looks like fun and games when you put music to it, but he was putting on a bulletproof vest in that one scene. So no, it's scary. It's not all fun and games, but it's worthwhile. I actually like that they added levity into the film. That actually made it a lot better for me to watch, because there were reliving that Phoenix City Council thing was every single. I've only seen the film. I've seen it twice now, but even this time I had the same reaction the first time, where I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember that day. That was a rough day.
Yeah. So what ended up happening with the Detroit chapter and Jex at this point?
Well, there was I think it's reforming, but I'm not on National Council anymore. And to answer your previous question with the hierarchy, so there's the chapter heads, and then National Council is about 9 people, and then there's executive ministry, which is Malcolm and Lucian. and they just vote sometimes with national council. So it's a very loose hierarchy. But in that, we encourage people to be autonomous. And for me, when I was on national council, it's if you don't want to follow this kind of overarching umbrella of what we're doing, that's fine, but you can't wave our flag around. And I think Jex had a problem with, we had rules about protest, but the problem is when you latch onto something and you're waving your flag with another cause, first of all, we can harm that cause by doing that. And secondly, if that cause goes off the rails, we're forever tied to them. So we had to really carefully orchestrate when and how we do protest or celebrations or counter-protest or ritual activities. And it's complicated.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, that's what I sort of love about the whole concept is we think of Satan as sort of chaos and just like, causing chaos throughout the world. But you guys, this film reveals that there's a lot of very carefully calibrated organizational structure that makes you guys work. And I think that's really fascinating.
And it's a volunteer organization. I mean, no one's getting paid for this. And people put in an unbelievable, people have put their life into this. And I've watched it. And I've watched people come and go and more people come. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. So another sort of not conflict, but theme in the film is whether you guys are an activist group or whether you're a religion or whether you're both. And I think that's probably something that's continuing to evolve. But where do you stand?
There's actually a piece, it's one of, I think, Lucian's best interviews. It's called Don't Let Your Activism Be Artless, I think is the name. If you're interested in the Satanic Temple, I actually think that's one of the best ones to start with because he goes through all of this stuff. But one of the things that he and I both talk about a lot is why is anything got to be either or? People ask us, are you trolls? Or are you this? Are you devil worshippers? Or are you this? And there's a lot of these questions where it's like, this black and white thinking is exactly the thing we're fighting against. So, to people like Jex or Michelle, activism is part of the religious practice, in fact. For me, I'm the battering ram. It's like I do the lawsuits. That's my part. So, a lot of people, they want to do things like they want to clean litter off their streets. And to them, that's their practice, so to speak. There is kind of an occult aspect to it. A lot of us have, for instance, altars, where we get involved in wearing the cloaks and all that stuff. I put on a reverse passion play once. That was kind of fun.
Can you tell me what a reverse passion play is, please?
Well, one of it sounds more absurd in such a quiet setting. There was a pope. There was a pope that made an edict that the church was above the state, essentially. And this happened, I think, in 1307, I want to say. So, I had that pope executed by a bunch of nuns. And it just it's called psychodrama, and that started with LaVey. I always give Church of Satan credit for that. It's over the top theatrics that is blasphemy as expression. So, why do we do it? Well, first of all, it's fun, but it does make a statement, I think, and it freaks people out. But it makes a lot of people think. The last one we did was I had witches burned at the stake, but the stakes were stripper poles, and the nuns were all dancers. So. We projected flames on the wall. It was, it's a good time.
So where do you do these passion plays? Reverse.
In Arizona, there's a bar in Bisbee called The Quarry, and the owner is friendly to the cause. And I think her last thing she said to us was, "I want as much fire and titties as is legally possible in the state of Arizona." And I said, "Well, this I can do." So, but there's a lot of things. It's fun. It's tragic, but it's all part of it. To me, all of these things are important. And I think if you ask 10 Satanists, you're going to get 10 different answers of which part they like best. I'm less into the activism, but some people, they're full on.
Yeah.
Some people just want the ritual aspect. I want to be useful, so my best use, I feel, is doing the lawsuits, since it's a unique skill, I think, within the organization. But yeah, that's what's great about it is it's, some people like Easter, some people like Christmas. It's like, some people are in it just for the turkey dinner, with their family. It just depends who you ask.
Yeah. So the band that you're in is called Scareater. I looked it up. And how does being in the temple sort of spill into your musical work, or vice versa?
I don't connect it at all. Actually, there's 5 of us in the band, and we're all from 5 different viewpoints. So I don't mix it out of respect for them, because I wouldn't want them to do that to me. But we were in the credits, actually.
Oh,
I think Scareater was in there for about 4 complete seconds. I'm pretty proud of that. But no, I really don't connect it. I try to keep my other stuff away, just out of courtesy to them. You know, I wouldn't want to be playing one of their church masses or something. You know, so.
Yeah. And what is on your altar at home?
I have a Baphomet statue. A bunch of weird stuff. There's a David Attenborough portrait that my girlfriend put on there.
That's amazing.
It's just, things, papers.
Yeah. So what are some future projects that you are working on? I guess update us on the lawsuits, first of all.
Okay. So, as it turns out, unfortunately, we did lose that Missouri case at the Supreme Court level, which was interesting because, and you saw a bit of McNaughton, that was the lawyer that handled that case, arguing at the Eighth Circuit. But the reason why is interesting. So our waiver was that it's against our religious beliefs to have to be subjected to 3 days of Christian literature before someone gets an abortion, because it has nothing to do with the medical procedure, obviously. But what happened through the litigation is we found out that when you signed it, you weren't signing their thing or whatever, their release form to say that I read it. It was to sign it to say that they received it. So the court distinguished that and said, well, since it wasn't forced, you weren't forced to read it, it wasn't a violation of your religious beliefs. So you can see these things are a lot more nuanced than people think. I think when it sounds like such an obvious violation sometimes, but they are very nuanced and fact-based, and sometimes you don't find this stuff out till the middle of litigation. You could be a year into a case and you find this fact and you're like, oh shit. So and then there was another case though where federally we filed, and I think that was that same lawyer, and she had gotten the abortion right before the filing, I think like the day before, and they found she didn't have legal standing, meaning in order for her to have legal standing, she would have had to get pregnant again and decide to have another abortion. So that's on appeal right now. But, I mean, there's good reason for standing laws. It's just in this scenario, the window is very small between the time you conceive and can get an abortion. So we'll see how that pans out. That's not my case. But in Scottsdale, we're actually at the tail end. We filed our cross-summary judgment motions. We expect it to go out without a trial, as these things typically do. So we're saying there's no facts in the dispute. They're saying that they're imposing a residency requirement, makes it legal. But as you can see, the city attorney of Phoenix said you can't apply that retroactively. That's kind of what happened in Scottsdale. So that's what we're arguing. I don't know what's going to happen. There's still going to be response briefs, but that's the gist of it. Oral arguments in July. We expect whichever side loses will appeal, and then that'll be argued in the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. As far as Baphomet, we filed an intervener motion, which is essentially saying if either side wins, we lose. So we're entitled to be a party. So if the Ten Commandments comes down, it doesn't address the fact that we wanted ours up. And if it stays up, it doesn't address the fact that we wanted ours up. The federal judge agreed as a matter of right that we were correct in that assessment. So we got thrown into the lawsuit way behind deadlines because it took months for that to happen, all that stuff to happen. And just recently, all the deadlines were extended. Now, here's something interesting: is the state filed for a stay, meaning to halt the proceedings because of what's called the Bradenburg case. There was a big cross in Florida. Some of you might have heard of this, where the American Humanist Association litigated and said since it was using taxpayer money to be repaired and all this stuff, it should be taken down. Now, the state of Arkansas said we need to wait for the Supreme Court to make that ruling, which is ironic to me because their whole argument is it's not a religious monument. So why are we going? Anyway, yeah, we don't know these things are so weird because none of the cases has a group been denied. It's always the mere presence, like the original lawsuit of the Ten Commandments, is the mere presence of it is an Establishment Clause violation. Or in Arizona, the mere fact that most of these are Christian is an endorsement of religion. That's been litigated with various results. However, in ours, we have a clear situation where one group was affirmatively denied. And that just never happens because no one asks. And that's the thing. It's like tyranny kind of fills a vacuum. It goes as far as you let it. If you don't push back, it'll just keep going and going and going. And now what I was describing in the film was I found out a little bit afterwards, they're calling it Project Blitz. It is a concerted effort to push so many Christian bills under the guise of religious liberty through the legislature in so many states that groups like the ACLU and the Freedom from Religion Foundation will be so overwhelmed that we can't keep up with litigation. I mean, that's evil to me.
Yes.
It's like we're going to force our religion on you so hard and so fast you can't do shit about it, is essentially their aim. And they think this is pious somehow. So, we're always like, who the fuck is the good guy here,
You guys are.
We're just, it's one of those things where it's like, what the hell are we supposed to do? Someone's got to do something about this. And if we're going to take the hate mail for it, it's worth it to us because they're not going to stop.
Yeah, and you guys have the sort of energy and I think the fun is part of it too. It sort of makes it easier to do in some respects.
Yeah, and there's a lot of freedom of expression in what we do. We're against shame and guilt and judgment, and a lot of things that you'll find in most Western religions are revolved around that.
So I'm going to turn it over to the audience, and our ushers will. So raise your hand, and our ushers will give you a mic.
Stu, thank you so much for your work. It is critically important. In my career, I'm a lawyer too, and I have fought for abortion rights. I've fought for LGBT rights. I've defended the porn industry. So I've fought the same enemy that you have. I've fought the same battles, and I know how hard it is, and I know how important it is, and I want to connect. I've also taught First Amendment law, so I'd love to connect with you after this, give you my card, and see how I can help on a volunteer basis. But my question is, when you were talking about studying revolutionary politics in college, and there's a lot of tension in this movie that I have experienced in my activism as well between revolutionaries and reformists. And when you talk about being both and, I really resonate with you because I consider myself a revolutionary reformist. I work within the system for change, but I do it as fiercely as I can to get as good a result as I can. How do you convince your friends in the movement, in the organization, who consider themselves revolutionaries and think you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools? How do you convince them that there's actually a place for reform within the system as well, that the two can be complementary?
I don't try to convince anyone anything. Okay. To me, it's, if you're going to ask me on a personal level, what I'm finding that the problem with a lot of people that are progressive is I call them pathologically woke, where it's relying on outrage culture and, everyone is flailing, wildly careening from one outrage to the next. And then if you're like, hey, I don't have time for this one, they're like, how dare you? We have to fight everything all the time. I'm like, nah, you're just screaming on the internet. So shut up for a second and let us work. That has not gone over well with some people. So it is, I think and I also watch vegan groups a lot, because in vegan groups, you'll find they have that exact dichotomy. You have the people that are like, if your grandma eats meat, I want you to slap her in her stupid face, or they're like, or they're like, wait a minute, hold on, we need to make some legislation, see what we can do here. And they're like, you're a sellout. I find it in every progressive group, it's exactly the same. And if we know anything about, revolutionaries on the left, they love to tear each other down. And it is a very hard dichotomy to manage. And I think it's not just within TST, but we definitely have that element of the people that are just like, burn it to the ground, versus the people that are like, let's see what we can do with what we have to work with. And those are always at odds, I think. Is that kind of what you were referring to? Okay.
Cool. Hey, Stu. I'm Noah. I'm a member as of like 100 minutes ago. I just had a question
Welcome.
about copyright stuff. I'm not sure if you're involved in the copyright case that has to do with the Sabrina show.
What about it?
I know. I'm sure you've heard like way too much. But what's your view on like the copyright status of Baphomet and using it like in a show like that?
Well, what happened in that case, so to give some background here, I wasn't the attorney on that case either, but I did PR for it, which was a nightmare. So basically what we did, what the Satanic Temple did, was we took our version of Baphomet off of source material, just like what was shown from the Eliphas Levi occultist image. But we made it a very specific way. For instance, it doesn't have breasts because we didn't want to get ourselves into obscenity law conflicts. We just wanted to do the, religious liberty aspect of it. So that monument, where it has the children on both sides and the way it looks and everything, that was actually a copyrighted image because that monument and that image was used for a very specific purpose. This is the Baphomet that we're trying to use for our organization to put on government property. So what we couldn't have is that image turning into the Sabrina monument because it would kind of take away the meaning of its basically religious message that we were trying to put out there, the reconciliation of opposites and things like that. So the idea with that case was you could have used any other source material. There's lots of different images of Baphomet, but they used the one that was copywritten by us for a specific purpose. That case was settled within a week. So that's how that went down. Now, if you're asking, do I agree with it, or what's your question?
Well, no, I was just asking what your view was on it, like in general.
That's my view.
Yeah,
It was settled. That's all I can say.
cool. They changed the image. So yeah.
I think in the next season they destroy it to
Yeah, no, they did. I just
did they?
directly taken from like the Satanic Temple.
Yeah, did you see the two? They looked identical. I mean, they clearly. What I think happened is somebody.
They look totally similar. Completely.
Yeah, I mean, and ours is very unique, especially without the breasts. But then you get the real TM Satanists that are like, the real one has boobs. You guys are phonies. You're phonies. So then we got to deal with that on the other side. It's like, oh, it did? We never knew that before. Boobs? We don't notice boobs.
Definitely different now. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Well, if no one else is going to raise their hand. So, you guys are definitely not the Church of Satan started by Anton LaVey. And you guys definitely aren't like the American Humanist Association, but you have kind of threads that connect you to both of them. What is like the primary difference? So, you guys have like a legal front, and you guys also have this ritualistic element, but what is it that you guys do that is special that wouldn't be covered by either of those things?
That's actually a pretty good question. So with the Church of Satan, I mean, there were some elements of it that were, I guess, considered social Darwinism. The Satanic Bible was basically a plagiarized piece from Might is Right. I feel like that didn't really sit well in the modern era. I think in the 60s it was great shock value in that, the whole psychodrama element. But I think the Satanic Temple is more of an outward expression of this. The Church of Satan was very under wraps. It was before the media and internet era too. So who knows back then if the Church of Satan started now, it might have been a whole different entity. But back then it was very shadowy. It was very private. It was very, you have your ritual chamber in your house was what it was called. It was very ritualistic, based on more occulty things than we really recognize, so to speak. So I think with the Satanic Temple, it's much more of a public's version of Satanism that has more humanistic elements than the 9 satanic statements or rules on earth that the Church of Satan has. So I just think this is a more modern approach, is I guess the best way I could describe it. But it does definitely have the psychodrama elements that I'll always attribute to LaVey. I think he was really good at that. And I always liked the Church of Satan kind of circus element to it. I feel like sometimes I emulate that when we do some of our public events. As far as the Humanist Association, I mean, I think they have some of the same stuff. That, obviously, our tenets seem to have kind of a humanistic spin on them. I don't think they really recognize themselves as a religion. I don't think it comes from the same kind of context that we're coming from, because we're coming from a context of people being, essentially witch hunted, where people were falsely accused of crimes, things that we like are considered evil and things like that. I think that whole construct really kind of makes a person who they are when you've grown up with that, and that could be from our generation or before. Where the American Humanist Association, I feel, is more of just a philosophical way to look at life that doesn't involve a God. So I just feel like the context is different, but there's definitely going to be similarities between us and the Church of Satan and us and the American Humanist Association. So I agree with you there, but I'd say the context is different. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Any other questions?
Yeah, hi. I'm a law student from China. I'm currently doing an internship in a public interest law firm. So the movie definitely speaks to me in many ways. I'm also a vegan, by the way. And I'll just state my question. So my question is, I want to know how your organization see the role of litigations play in their cause. I mean, it seems that from your description, you're currently just, managing the legal risk. But I'm also wondering, is your organization seeing litigation as a channel for progress? To challenge the establishment?
Of course, my role is very unique in that, since I'm the one that's doing a lot of this. And we have more and more lawyers as we go on. So I now have a co-counsel guy that I'm working with. So I think as this happens and there's more challenges, I think there's going to be more and more of a legal aspect. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a big win or a big lose. And either way, that's going to set the stage for what happens next with us. And these things take years. So we started litigating, 3, 4. The only thing that we've ever completed was a copyright thing that we never asked for or wanted. So when it comes to the what's called 1983 claims, which are the civil rights violation by the government, we haven't finished one yet, because either if we lost one, they're going to appeal, or we're going to appeal, and if we beat the government on one, they're going to appeal. So it's going to take years before we ever set a precedent. And if we lose the Baphomet case or lose the invocation case, we're not going to ever bring one of those again, and we're going to ruin it for everyone else for the most part, because we're going to set bad precedent. So we're working on a bunch of fronts right now, and we don't know how this is going to turn out. But say, for instance, we win one of these invocation cases, and then the government still does it. We're just going to be filing suits left and right until they stop doing what they're doing. But we clearly know they don't care about the Constitution, these theocrats. They don't give a shit about that. So we're going to have to keep slapping them down, or we're going to have to lose to a point where we can't fight it anymore. So I think it's going to depend on which things we gain ground on or not. But for me, this is kind of my role in this whole organization, so it's an important part for me. But say, hypothetically, we were to win everything, and this never happened again, we would still be Satanists. There would still be all that other aspect. We wouldn't go away. We're not defined by this. It's just one aspect of it. But I think it's an important aspect, since the entire metaphorical construct is kind of the rebellion and the pushback of what we see as tyrannical authority. Was that a very convoluted answer to your question?
Ask a small follow-up question. Yeah, so in light of the civil rights movement and how NAACP, strategize their legal fight against racial discrimination, I was wondering whether the Satanic Temple is alone in this religious liberty fight, or you're collaborating with some similar organizations. And do you have a broad and long-term litigation goal that you are strategizing and hoping to attain, religious liberty substantively by litigations?
We actually do not collaborate with other organizations because we don't want to harm them. Because imagine the public perception if we were to get on board with some other group, and it's like, oh, that group's in league with the devil. That's not going to look good for them publicly. So we try to keep it separate for the other organization's sake. Of course, that puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage because there's no pooling of resources. Though we do get support, for instance, if any of these go to the Court of Appeals, there will be amicus briefs filed on behalf of other organizations. But to answer your question, what the long-term goal is, we never expect any of this stuff to happen. So, for instance, an example is we got that Adopt a Highway thing in Arizona and a few other states. Well, they're starting to deny them. We thought, oh, well, I guess this is something that the government, the Department of Transportation, so many weird groups asked to adopt highways that we're not even a blip on the radar. But all of a sudden we are. So now all of a sudden there's a lawsuit in another state that we didn't expect. Albany, New York is an example of one. We didn't expect that to happen. So we're kind of acting in reaction to discrimination. We're not looking for it. We're just we are testing the waters in very different ways, but we never know when we're going to get discriminated against. So when there's a long-term goal, it's basically, these campaigns are created by chapters, and they'll throw in some campaign, and all of a sudden the government says no, and we're like, great, now we have another lawsuit on our hands, So we don't know. I mean, there's no long-term goal because, first of all, no one's ever done this before. I mean, we are really kind of treading new ground when it comes to this type of First Amendment law, because we're not arguing government free speech. We're not arguing for the removal of religion from the public square. We're arguing for the inclusion in what they're seeing as an aggressive way, which is kind of funny to me because it's just, hey, we're just trying to do the same exact thing you're doing. They're like, oh, whoa, how dare you? Religious liberty, that's for my religion, So no one's really done this kind of stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, first I'll say I'm from Tucson, so it's great to see someone from Tucson doing the Lord's work. But I'm curious, how did the film come together? Was it something that was produced specifically by the temple or by a third party? And and I'm also curious how much distribution you're getting for it.
I have no idea. No, it's not made by the temple. It was Penny and Gabe, I think, approached Lucian, and then they started filming the movie. I think it was a 3-year project. They were in Tucson a lot, actually, at the time, because it was when the film started filming, it was when the Arizona chapter really started blowing up. So they spent a lot of time with us in Arizona. But I couldn't answer anything beyond that because, I mean, that's a question for Magnolia, I think. But if I remember correctly, I saw Penny post something that it's in 78 theaters right now, but I think it's going to be more after that. I don't know. I don't know how this stuff works, really. Was that any other questions on that?
Okay, we'll take one more question.
Hi, this will be brief. I'm curious to know what you feel about being called, rather dismissed as a satirical organization.
That's about the least offensive thing we get. So, I think if you do anything outside the norm, you're a joke. I mean, if you were to tell someone you followed the Norse gods, they'd laugh at you. If you said that you believed in the Hindu gods, they dismiss it. So I think if you're not just a very standard, waspy Christian, you're going to get laughed at if you try to do anything new or anything different. And this is my big discovery through this personally was, wow, if you do anything out of the ordinary, it feels like I'm in the elementary school cafeteria. It's like you wear a shirt with something on it that's not, the norm. They're going to push you around. It never goes away. So when people say it's satirical, I don't take offense to that because if you see all the crazy looking stuff we do, it's out of the ordinary. But I mean, I like to always refer to pictures of the Catholic Church. You see their hats? I mean, it's just whatever's normalized. If we were to do this everywhere and this has become the norm, we would be the status quo. It's just the status quo never realizes how they're drinking the blood and eating the body. That's not creeping anybody. Having a guy nailed to a board in a school, that's normal, but our goat's weird. So it's like nobody has any introspection to this stuff. So being called satire or a joke or phony, that's just par for the course, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't think you would be offended by it. I just wondered about the dismissal of the use or application of satire to further some productive end.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I think I think that goes the same for blasphemy too, where people are going, oh, you're just trying to upset somebody. It's like, actually, we're not doing this for you. We're doing this for ourselves. Because for us, it's a release of that authority, that whatever shame and guilt religion put on us. It's kind of a release of that. I stopped using the word cathartic because I think that could have a negative connotation, but it's like transformative. So it's always funny when they're like, oh, you're just doing this to offend me. It's like, actually, we don't care about you. It had nothing to do with you. Like, stop thinking this is all about what your delicate sensibilities are. And if you're offended, that's your problem, not ours, you know? So we in turn, we know we're going to get this. We go into it knowing we're going to be called a joke or satirical or phony, or, you know, we get it from the atheist community. We get it from the Church of Satan. We pretty much get it from every direction, which kind of strengthens my resolve in a way.
Stu, thank you. Thank you for doing Satan's work.
All right. Well, thanks for sticking around and hearing me yammer.
Hail Satan is actually opening in LA at the Landmark Theaters on Pico and at the ArcLight Hollywood this Friday. So please tell your friends to go see it. Thank you, everyone.